The History Things podcast is brought to you by TR Historical, your one-stop shop for all your historical fan gear needs. Visit trhistorical.com and use the promo code HistoryThings to receive 10% off your next purchase. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the show.
Are you ready?
Welcome back to the History Things podcast, field video exclusive, sponsored by TR Historical. Special guest Avery Lentz, host of Battles of Banter podcast, still with us today. So thanks for hanging with us for a moment as we just sort of got ourselves up this hill into a better filming situation. We're going to, like I said, do something unprecedented for as far as what Matt and I have done, which is a series of still shots on camera stands. We're going to kind of move ourselves up a couple blocks to kind of follow the path of the Union troops that were establishing and now attacking into the town. Avery, sort of get us established here. Set us up with the Union units that have made their way right up here from the river, the beachhead they just established, and against the Mississippi Confederate forces they're fighting against.
Sure. So where we're standing right now, we are kind of in between a couple different blocks here. So we're standing on Hawk Street. Further over, you're going to actually have, how do you pronounce it so I don't butcher it? Fuck you streets. I always say fucker. That's always funny. Anyway, the point is, between these two streets, you're going to have a concentration of Union forces in the afternoon of December 11th. And when I say that, I'm talking 2 brigades total that are going to conglomerate in this general vicinity before they begin to push into the town. Primarily on this side of the street where we are going to be, we are going to be following Norman J. Hall's brigade of Oliver Howard's division of Darius Couch's 2nd Corps. It's Darius Couch, not Darius Couch.
That's right.
R.I.P. Ed Bears.
Yeah. Miss you.
Point is that these brigades will also be joined. It's almost 5 to 6 regiments that will be over here. And one thing to remember is that the brigades that will be making this street fight will also be making those very horrendous charges in the coming days. So for the guys in Hall's brigade, this is a rough fight. Yeah. This is probably one of the roughest battles of the entire war for them. And so one thing to remember here is that you're going to have Hall's troops. They're going to be establishing kind of a walking skirmish line between 2 different streets. Also coming up to join them in their sister brigade is going to be a brigade of Pennsylvanians under Joshua Owens. Not the country music star, because there is a country music star with the name of Josh Owens. But it's different.
Good
It might
to know.
be Jake
Isn't
Owens.
that Jake Owens?
It's Jake Owens. Damn it all. Point is, I don't listen to country music. Point is.
And yet he pulled the country music reference.
That's your point. Anyway, the point is that Joshua Owens guys are very unique because they are going to be hailing from, if you couldn't tell by my shirt, Philadelphia. So the Philadelphia Brigade is here, and they are going to be basically heading down Sophia Street all the way down till they get to the corners of George Street, William Street, as well as Caroline Street. So because of this, you're going to basically have 2 Union brigades in this vicinity. And there's probably about half a mile between, maybe less, between these 2 brigades. Their job is to push forward up these streets and basically push out any leftover Mississippi defenders.
Remember, Barksdale's not supposed to be here. And
No.
instead he's doing a really strong fighting defense, and it sort of becomes a new right in front of your face objective, like, all right, clear the town. Like, we were expecting to kind of have the town already cleared, right? Because they know the Confederates are holding positions up on Marie's Heights and things like that. So they're basically what are you even still doing here? So the mission now becomes just, okay, we need to take the town. And so that's what we're about to get into. So we're going to sort of start to step back here and follow the couple blocks that these guys were literally fighting. Every step we take, these guys are taking the same steps but under fire. It's kind of like a really ridiculous Black Hawk Down looking scene here, street to street. Disaster, rubble, and stuff like that everywhere. Matt's got a great image of this. We've got a pretty cool print here. This is one of the Massachusetts. This is 20th Massachusetts.
Same one.
I got a pretty neat
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
We all did the same research. But got a cool quote, cool little story from the 20th Mass we'll get to in a few moments here. But Avery, let's go ahead and get ourselves moving here. We'll talk about some of this fighting here, and we'll get up to, I guess, Princess Anne, where they turn the corner and start to head into the next part of the story.
Sure.
All right.
Now, what's important to remember, folks, is that these troops, they're utilizing not only skirmish lines, but they're also trying to form lines of battle. But look how wide these streets are here. They're not going to be able to throw themselves into a full line. So we're going to start seeing small unit tactics being developed, breaking into platoons, and later even down to squads. Now, platoons are something that exists during the Civil War, though we think about it more in, say, a more modern context. But a company could usually be broken down into 2 platoons, sometimes more, depending on the size of the company, and they would be a smaller unit that could be utilized and maneuvered in tighter spaces. Now, as you can tell, we are moving uphill, so Confederate troops, they're not only utilizing good terrain, but they're also utilizing all the buildings around us. All these little yards, the houses themselves, so forth and so on.
So every step we're taking, guys, remember, under fire, right? Barksdale's guys are not giving any of this ground easily. So we're getting close to an area, I believe Michigan Alley is right here, this gravel area. We always like to give shout outs about Michigan to our co-host Matt, because Matt is obviously a proud Michigander. But you got to kind of remember, right, Matt, we were talking about this a minute ago. In this type of unprecedented street fighting, these guys are looking for cover anywhere they can when they're absolutely getting shot up. And so you have some of the guys from the 7th Michigan going right down this alleyway here. If we can swing around and just show you. This is private property, a bunch of residential area now, backyards. It was residential at the time, still is now, but much nicer and cleaner, really pretty backyards. But at once upon a time, Michigan troops were just diving down this alleyway, kind of looking for cover, anything to keep them safe as the Mississippians were giving them hell on the way up the street here. We'll keep moving because obviously the objective is to get them out of town. So if we're following in the advance of the Union troops, right, the fight doesn't end right here. We got to keep pressing on. Our first intersection we come to is Caroline, I believe. Yep. It's Caroline Street. Obviously, intersections in street fights are super important because you're going to begin to take fire from multiple directions. Right now, the fire is mostly concentrated in a north and south kind of way. No pun intended, but it's kind of coming directly at you in return. But we're going to start to take things like flanking fire and stuff like that. So we'll just follow along for a moment. We'll get up here to the intersection.
Also in these intersections that the 19th and 20th Massachusetts will have probably the worst days of the war. In their accounts, they will say that the fighting that takes place at these intersections is going to be some of the heaviest fighting, but some of the heaviest losses for each regiment. And that's saying something considering their war record.
Now, Avery, how many of the buildings we're looking at today are witness buildings, real time to the battle itself?
I honestly could not tell you. These are very similar to the structures that you would have seen, but I cannot say for sure which ones are original. I can just say that the general outline of the street is the same. You would have had this dirt intersection here, obviously, with buildings on various sizes here. These houses roughly the same shapes and sizes, but you would have had Confederates hunkered behind them, some occupying windows here, and also having an interlacing fire because remember, this is a bottleneck.
Yeah.
So all the Union forces coming up this street as well as here, you also are going to have these bottlenecks being pincered by these almost triangular interlacing fires coming from across the street. And so this is something to remember. You also have some of these houses that have balconies here, and you would have seen Confederates actually piling up different pieces of furniture or wooden clapboards and whatnot, shooting at Union forces down in the street from a higher vantage point. So if you want to talk, like Pat said, it's pretty much like a Black Hawk Down chaotic situation.
So let's go over something real quick. Well, just follow me with the cameras for a moment here. So just want to show you some of the places that like Confederate troops could have been popping out and firing at you. So one, when you're moving up the street, if we'll just turn the camera back around and just show the long shot where we just came from, right? Like Avery just said, this is a bottleneck, right? The Union troops and the Confederate troops firing at each other really only have to worry about what's happening in this lane here. As far as Confederate troops being in these other houses, which we'll swing around and show you in a minute, they're kind of hidden from sight because of big buildings like these, the homes. They're providing a fair amount of coverage. So again, really only focused on what's happening. But you get up to an intersection like this, and first of all, along the way, you notice a lot of these foundations have these little windows in them. A lot of these Confederates got trapped in some of these cellars because of Hunt's punishing artillery. They're out of the fight when there's nobody moving through these streets and they're just engineers crossing the river. But now with Union troops coming by, they're at ankle height. Muskets are starting to pop out of these windows. You start to turn the corner, just like Avery said, right? Every window you see here could potentially have a Confederate musket sticking out of it. And then you break the boundary of the edge of the house, and you just look left and right. You're at a major intersection here, and every Confederate that couldn't see you while you were in this bottleneck can now see you. And that's why the 19th and the 20th Massachusetts get chewed up so much, and they list it as one of their worst days of the war. But they still got another block or so to go before they can sort of really turn the corner and make the headway as far as clearing out.
No pun intended.
Yeah, clearing out the Confederate defenders. So we'll cross the street safely here. Looking both ways, right? And then we'll continue here back into another bottleneck.
Now, when these regiments are crossing the streets, they're actually deploying companies to both of their flanks to try to not only do something about the Confederate defenders, but also to guard their flanks as they're continuing to push deeper into Fredericksburg. It would be these intersections that would allow them to break out into the more classic battle line scenarios, but again, these are not particularly wide streets, and we're going to see a lot of the smaller unit tactics we mentioned, the squads and platoons.
All right, so we'll keep moving up here. Now, same thing as we go into this bottleneck here. If you turn the camera around while you're moving there, you can see that we're now exposing ourselves to more windows at our rear. So this is kind of becoming a 360-degree fight very, very quickly. So we'll head back up the street here and continue. What street are we on, Avery? We're still on Hawk Street. So we're still on Hawk Street. So Princess Anne is the intersection of consequence because it is where the Union troops here are able to sort of establish that they're here. They are in this town and they are doing the driving. They are not the ones being driven.
At this point, they're going to be primarily facing only about 2 regiments of Confederates. You have the 13th Mississippi here. You're also going to have elements of the 21st Mississippi. So the brigade of William Barstow, they have to cover multiple fronts here. And so it's really hard to do so when your men are limited. And also when you're split up into, what would you say, Matt, like squads almost.
Right.
Not even companies.
Right,
Because now we're hiding in a bracketed kind of formation as best we can. Barksdale had to be pretty inventive here, as did the Union forces under Hall and Owen as they navigated through these streets. And so basically, we're fighting conglomerate companies of different Mississippi regiments. And when you get to these intersections where you have a little bit more mobility, like Matt had said, that's where we're going to wheel out. That's where we're going to get into better battle lines, get a heavier line of volley fire, and really bring our numbers to bear. And at this point, the Union reached this point, they reached Princess Anne Street, where we are now. This is where they're going to try to push out the last Confederate remnant. And as for the Confederates, this is where they're going to decide it's time to boogie on out of here. It's time to fall back. At this point, if we stay here, it's going to be unattainable. Now, if you place up Princess Anne Street here, you see that it goes uphill. So that's another thing to remember about this street fight. It's up on rising and falling ground. It's uneven. It's not your standard urban battle the way I would think of it. This terrain is miserable. I'll pass it back to Pat.
So we're now in the area where I like to tell a story about Major Henry Abbott. It's not a long story. It's just a moment of swagger, you could say. I always like to harp on the mantra of people being people. Personalities of all types participated in this war: introverts, extroverts, cowards, brave people, things like that. And there were people with a bit of flash and pizzazz and style, and usually they come in big names like Jeb Stuart and stuff like that. Major Henry Abbott of the 20th Massachusetts, though, here, knowing that those guys, specifically his guys, got chewed up like they did moving through the town here, but still sort of succeeded in their mission of driving off Barksdale's men, knows he's leaving this field in a semi-victorious fashion when his guys are called off the line, and he quits the field in a very awesome way. He's walking off the field, guys. He's got his saber, and he starts twirling it around his finger as he walks off. You think about every kid, you know, with the cane and things like that. That exact image you're thinking of right now. Major Henry Abbott, when he's walking off the streets here, is allegedly twirling his sword. And I don't know if he's whistling or anything along the way, but that would be fitting. That would be fitting. But he knows that his boys just did a good bit of work and he's proud of it, and he's walking off with a pep in his step and some confidence, which the Union Army will need specifically here as they head towards Marie's Heights. Remember, they had a chance at one point to get across the river and occupy the heights themselves before Lee could get here. Lee got here, occupied those heights themselves, and so now it is the Union troops who are facing the uphill attack against strong defenses. The confidence that I guess Major Henry Abbott is having, they're going to need, because the charges coming up on December 13th are going to eat the boys up. Yeah. Anything you want to add, Matt, before we get out of here?
So by 4 o'clock, General Barksdale's Mississippians are being ordered now from Lee up on the high ground up on Marie's Heights to evacuate Fredericksburg. They have done all they could. They have really delayed this Union advance for as long as possible at this point, and they're being ordered out of Fredericksburg. The fighting here in Fredericksburg, the actual street fighting, would probably peter out over the next half hour as the last elements are leaving town. And then, over the next several hours, as the rest of the Army of the Potomac begins to move across those crossings, we're going to have some steam being let off, aren't we, guys?
Yes.
That's right. I like to reference the scene in the movie Gods and Generals because it's over the top, it's ridiculous, but it's kind of one of the more accurate portrayals of any Civil War stuff that goes on. The Union troops had been, like I said, fighting, dying, and marching through most of the summer and fall of 1862, and by the time they established themselves here in a Confederate stronghold town, it's a very symbolic
significant
city.
town.
It's got ties to the George Washington family, ties to the Lee family, things like that. So Fredericksburg itself is important to morale. And now the Union troops that are holding this place know that they are holding on to something that's important to their enemy, and they're going to blow off the steam, like Matt said, and they're going to begin to go into these homes, go into these buildings, find nice memorabilia, paintings, furniture, jewelry, food.
And it's not just the enlisted men, officers are doing it as well. But one thing I would like to note is that the movie makes it look like it's absolute chaos, and that it's really not. The movie also makes it look like this is a offshoot occurrence, but both sides did this in pretty much every town they went through. It's almost it's kind of a characteristic of an army.
Right.
When an army goes through any kind of town, they're going to take the opportunity to grab anything they can, anything that they want for souvenirs. Whether that's right or wrong, that's not for me to say. But that's just something that characteristically armies have done in every major war. And so what the Union Army does here is not necessarily out of order. It's just another aspect of war as a whole. And overall, the thing is, most of the belongings that they're finding were left behind by the families that couldn't haul it out of here. Most of the residents of Fredericksburg had evacuated prior to the battle and had grabbed everything they could and piled it into wagons and gotten out of Dodge way before the fighting had even started here.
And the final ones are leaving town right now. Those who chose to stay and had to endure the street fight and just hunkering in place and weren't casualties themselves, they now were lining the streets getting out of here in frightful panic. Because the Union Army is going to contain this sort of, I don't want to use the word riot, looting, vandalism, that's getting like extremely out of hand. Marcena Patrick comes in and sort of puts the kibosh on it. He's the guy in Gods and Generals that says, "This is an army, not a rabble." You know, and it's one moment in the sun, and he acts the crap out of that. Good job. So what we're going to end up doing is sort of leave you here at the street fight, right? Confederate troops have vacated the town. Union troops are now crossing in over these pontoon bridges that we have just covered. The citizens themselves that had remained are now leaving, and we're now preparing for the straight up fight that we've known was coming all along for these last several days now. So when the day ends here on the 11th and we go into the 12th where things are starting to like just prep for the coming battle, you have kind of try to imagine Burnside sitting down here somewhere looking up and Lee looking down. Everybody just knows the stakes. They know now we've gotten through all the preliminaries and it's showtime. So we're going to leave you here. We're going to take a break. Let's get a real-time time check here. What time is it, bud?
11:09.
11:09. We'll come back at 1 o'clock. We'll come back at 1 o'clock. We'll be over on Prospect Hill. We're going to continue the story there where the big main line infantry attacks take place. So we thank you for watching the History of Things podcast, field exclusive, sponsored by TR Historical. Go grab some lunch, get some water, refresh yourselves, because we got tons more Battle of Fredericksburg coming your way with our special guest Avery Lentz, host of Battles of Banter podcast. So we'll see you very soon. See you at 1 o'clock.